Always loved talking to Brandon Garrett. I would consider him old school. Not so old that the school didn't exist, but he definitely has more of those old school values than some newer guys. He talks about his first days at Nelson County, playing for Coach Nelson Fox, and just growing up. When did Brandon Garrett know he wanted to be a coach? All that and more on the Sports Buffet podcast. Let's go to young Brandon. When did Brandon Garrett know he wanted to be a basketball coach?
I think it was early on that I knew that I wanted to be involved in the game. I think everybody who plays the game thinks they're going to just keep on playing. But at that point, when you figure out, I can't keep playing, then what's the next step? And actually, my coach in high school, Nelson Fox at Parent Clore, kind of reached out to me about coaching the middle school team for him. And kind of running the same things that we ran in high school. And then as soon as I did that, I had the coaching bug, and I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do.
When did you feel like you were going to stop playing, like that this is not going to last forever?
Um, I went through a couple different scenarios with that. I went to a prep school after high school. Grades weren't very good. And plus, I needed some more exposure coming from a small school. Um, Broke my hand the summer after that, so I didn't play because I was going to have to redshirt. I took a long route, went back and played college. But, after I had kids, I had, my kids early on. And it's just the way life worked out, and so how am I going to stay close to the game, support my family? Because I knew I couldn't keep playing. So, it was early on, really, that I found that out. But, and once I started coaching, I just rolled, and one year after another, I was coaching. I coached rec league, I coached middle school, I coached JV, varsity, and enjoyed every year of it. Different vibes. You're coaching little kids and even coaching in college when you're coaching young adults. But it's still the game of basketball, and teaching that and teaching life lessons through that is really what I loved.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Bridgewater is where the playing career
Uh,
happened.
Ferrum.
Okay, fair. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So, I got recruited, from Ferrum, by Ferrum and a few other schools out of high school. But again, back in those days, it was so different because you had to see everybody in person. We had some good teams in high school. We had some really good teams. We went back-to-back state tournaments, lost to William Monroe 2 years in a row. They came down, I think, to single A. Back then it was 1, 2, and 3A. They
Right.
came back down. They came down to single A for a 4-year cycle, I think, and they beat us in the state championship in football when I was a freshman, and then beat us in basketball junior and senior year. So they had our number for sure. But like I said, James Johnson, actually, who was at Virginia Tech as the head coach, and now he's went back to Ferrum. Recently got that job. He's the one that recruited me. Went to prep school. He ended up at Longwood. And this is just how those coaching connections work. So when I was in prep school, he's recruiting me at Longwood. I didn't go to Longwood. Some things didn't pan out for me. I was looking at other schools. But we kept that relationship. And when he was at Virginia Tech, he actually was looking at another kid that we had when I was coaching in Nelson. But, I ended up going to Ferrum, and my daughter Kelsey was already born, and playing there a little bit. But, getting that experience to play in college was great, and that's something that I took to my players, was out when I was coaching high school.
Always been a sports fan?
Always crazy sports fan since I was little. Again, different times, us older guys, we grow up, we watch sports on TV. I remember looking at baseball cards and football cards, and I could tell you where everybody went to college, and, big wrestling fan growing up. So anything sports related, that was me.
Now, you grew up in Buena Vista, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Do you have what I call the street light mentality, to where I'm going to, leave my house early morning and not coming home till the street lights come on type thing?
Yep, exactly. In Buena Vista, small town, but you have your little neighborhoods where growing up, it was a great place to grow up, and we had our own little group of guys who would get together, and we'd ride bikes and go to stores, play video games, and uh, you know I've said it already a couple times. It was a different time in the world, and parents were like, "Okay, you're going with so and so. Be back at dark," and just trusted that that you were with these other kids and doing the right things.
Yeah, I think back then a lot of it was like go outside. I mean, yeah, you get video games, you got ESPN stuff like that, but I mean, your life is more built on the bikes, playing basketball, maybe playing baseball at a playground, stuff like that, as opposed to we're going to sit around all day and watch TV.
You're right. And we did play some video games. You're right, but it wasn't like we stayed on that. And I think the internet has a lot to do with it. My boys sometimes, especially my younger one, my older ones are kind of grown out of it a little bit. But he'll get on the headset talking to buddies, and he actually just went to the beach a couple weeks ago, and he went with his gaming buddies. One's from Georgia, and one's from Tennessee, and they met up at the beach with some other buddies. It's kind of crazy, but you're right. We would play a little bit, then we would go outside and we did our thing outside, and that's where we stayed,
Did you ever read like the old college basketball yearbooks to where they kind of wrote a profile of each player?
Uh, yes,
What would the profile of
indeed.
Brandon Garrett read?
Oh man, I don't know. I was like 6'5", 6'6". My game changed throughout the years, and playing for a guy like Coach Fox, who I think, I've been around a lot of coaches, and to me, he's the greatest coach I've ever been around. I've heard a lot of people speak, and he would take pieces of Bobby Knight and John Wooden, and just take the pieces and integrate it into his program, and as a young guy, it's kind of difficult playing in that system. But once I graduated and I got to experience other coaches and other programs, that's when my appreciation for him really grew. So he wasn't big on, me shooting the three or something like that. But as I played more, I got to do that more. I handled the ball a lot more. Um, I really felt like as a player, I could play anywhere. I wasn't really a true five, but like I said, when I went and did post grad thing, there were times where I would run, the point. Not the, I could handle the ball pretty decent for someone my size at the time. The game's changed a lot. You see a lot of big guards now, but back then that wasn't very common.
Right. I was going to say in high school, and I don't mean to be insulting when I say this. Perry McClure is a small school, obviously. There's no such thing as Euros or floating around. And if a 6'5" guy is in single A, then his bottom better be on the block. He doesn't need to pop out and shoot threes and that type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and and Coach he was more of a traditionalist. And the game's really changed in the last 10 or 15 years a lot, but that's the way it was. And we actually, it's hard to believe a school that was that small. We probably had about 300 kids at the time. I think it's much smaller now. But, we had a kid who was the best athlete in our class. It was about 6'6". And then there was three more of us that were about 6'5", close to 6'6". So we had four guys that, we started. I remember we played Riverheads and we kind of experiment with the lineup. And it was four of us, 6'5" or better. And then we had a point guard. He wasn't the normal point guard. He kind of played backup, more of a wing guy, but he ran the point a little bit. He was about 6'2" or 6'3", so we could play really big. And a lot of that came from us just getting out and playing. Buena Vista is very small. And, at that time, being a teenager, we knew where the games were. You go downtown on the playground, and it was right on Main Street. And everybody just knew, like, hey, we're playing down there. So people would just show up and we just start playing, and we play all day long.
I believe it was Charlie Bennett is the AD at Nelson when you took the job, correct? Or is it Billy?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Charlie Bennett. Yep.
So, how did that phone call go when Charlie said, "You're my pick. You're the choice"?
I was super excited. I had been at Rockbridge as the JV coach under Richard Weitzel. I did that for a couple years, coach middle school. Um, and when I got the call at Nelson, I was super excited. And I remember Joe Dan Johnson was the principal at the middle school, and I remember him walking me around, and he said you should feel pretty lucky. He said jobs don't open up here very often. And he wasn't talking so much about the basketball position as he was the teaching position. And, I got over there and I found out the people in Nelson County, the teachers, the community, the kids, they're great people. I couldn't ask for a better place to have ended up. But I can't tell you how excited I was to get my first real head coaching job where I'm running my own program and doing my own thing.
How many years at Nelson?
I coached there for 10 years.
How many years before Thomas Brown?
When I got there, Thomas was a junior.
Okay.
So the first time I walked in the gym, and I remember this vividly, I walked in the gym. It was summer. I had just gotten the job in June. So this was probably late June, mid to late June. I walk in there, and Thomas hits about 10 or 12 threes from the left wing, but he's at least NBA range or a little bit deeper. And he hits these in a row. He's just knocking them down left and right, left and right. And that's when I knew, like, okay, we got something here. We just have to get the pieces around him. And that really, that first year, that's what that was all about, was just learning how to play with each other and really how to win. I think we were 9-12 my first year, but we were in so many games and we would get to the fourth quarter and, we would lose it in the fourth quarter because of possession here, possession there. And a lot of that's on me as a coach, but we were also learning as a team, and I was learning as well, you know, how to win. We would get there, but we had to figure out how to get over that hump and, secure a victory.
When do you feel like the moment came to where you learned how to win as a team?
Well, we that group of guys with Thomas, we had TJ Martin, his brother Trevor, who was young. Trevor was a freshman the next year, so he was in eighth grade my first year and played JV. We had Mike and Chris Jones, Steve Washington, Cameron Coles, Trey Barnett. That's just some of them. Those guys wanted to be in the gym. And I was telling a coaching buddy of mine just the other day, um, when you have kids they call you and wanting to be in the gym, you got to go. That as a coach, you have to go. And they wanted to be in the gym. So when it hit me was that summer after my first year. And I'd have to ask Paul on this, but I'm pretty sure we played 59 games between spring leagues, summer leagues, and camps. We were all over the place. We played in Christiansburg. We went to camps in West Virginia. We played everywhere. And we grew so much as a team. And that's when Thomas started to trust his teammates. You could see it instead of, taking that extra dribble to the basket, he was kicking out and hitting the wing, hitting TJ on that wing, and he's knocking down the three. And you could see the trust and you could see the team bond starting to build because we would get out of town, we'd stay in a hotel or stay on a college campus. And these guys who were already tight, they just grew closer and closer. And, they would all tell you today, if you ask them, that's the epitome of a team is those guys are so unselfish. Thomas was a great player, but we had these other guys who, bought into our system and what we were trying to do. And, we just played as one unit. And we felt like every time we stepped on the floor, we were the best team out there. And we were going to bring it every night.
So year two of your regime, Thomas Brown's senior year, that's when you felt like things really kind of clicked?
Yeah, the summer before. So
Okay.
going into that senior year.
Right.
Yeah.
Who do you remember the first game that's I'll call it the senior year, and I just mean Thomas's senior year. Do you remember the first game or early on?
I I don't remember the first game, but I know we played Buckingham a couple times. Um, you know, some of those out of district games that we played, and we were beating teams by 20 points pretty easily. I remember we played Amherst, and I think we beat Amherst by like 47 points or
Well,
something
let me
like that.
interrupt real quick. Did that happen before, or did that only happen once you felt like, and I'll use the words here, once y'all got kind of closer and bonded? Is that when that started happening, or did that happen beforehand?
No, that was after. So going, we played that summer. We played, all those games, and I felt like we grew as a team. Um, on the court and off the court. And then once we, that summer ended, school starts, we had some of our guys play football. And I always encouraged our guys, if you want to play football, go play football. We're going to be in the gym, but if that's something you want to do, then let's do it by all means. And we had some of our guys, play football. But we knew we had something special or the potential to have something special with that team. And, it clicked from day one. It's like we didn't miss a beat from summer right into the start of the season. And, we're beating teams by 20 points pretty easily. And teams that are, on paper, like an Amherst, who you would think, okay, they're 4A or whatever they were at the time. There's no way we should be playing with those guys, but we're beating them by 40 points.
Was there a moment you felt like where you turned to maybe Coach Rogers or Coach Decker or Coach Pelter, and it's like, we've got it going now? Or was it in the summer? I kind of feel like I'm overgoing summer here a little bit, but that sounds like it was really huge.
It was huge. And I mean, I wouldn't say it was one moment, but all of us would kind of look at each other, and as a basketball coach, and other coaches who will hear this or been in this situation, you'll see a play and you're like, that's it. That's it right there. That's exactly how it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to look. And I mean, countless times, they would look at me or I would look at them and like, that's it. That's where we're supposed to be, on defense, or that's what we're supposed to be doing, making that extra pass on offense, or that's, we're getting out running the break. So I can't say it was one particular thing, but it was like everybody knew, and our guys knew. They were very mature with the game. They picked up a lot. They were, when I got to Nelson, those kids, they wanted to win. They were hungry, and I was lucky enough just to be the guy to go in there and kind of steer them in the right direction.
You talked about encouraging kids to play other sports. Is that Brandon Garrett mentality, or is that Perry McClure? Hey, we don't have, 800 athletes to share from. We have maybe, 75. So people have to play multiple sports.
I think it's both. I think because I grew up that way, playing, you get a little bit of, things from other sports. I think with baseball, you get that eye-hand coordination.
Right.
Basketball, you can work on your footwork, and of course, football. It's a toughness that's a little bit different than other sports. I think you get a little bit from every other sport. And I tell this story all the time. I had a kid for me, Tony Barnett, was not a basketball player, but really worked on his footwork. And Tony went to ODU, and I think he started 2 or 3 years down there at guard on their offensive line. And I'm not saying that had a lot to do with me personally, but I know basketball helped him with his footwork a little bit. So, I mean, that's just an example. I think other sports can help you. Now, of course, our mentality was, hey, if you're not playing football or golf or cross country or whatever, then you need to be in the gym with us. You need to be doing something.
From your playing days, who are some multi-sport athletes that stick out to you when you played?
Oh, gosh. I mean,
Everybody?
Rockbridge had a bunch. Yeah, because that's what you did,
Right.
because, that's just what kids did. I know Rockbridge had some of them. One guy that sticks out in my mind that actually lives over in Lynchburg is, growing up, Marty Early, Rodney Early. He's a Glasgow kid. Glasgow had tons of athletes, growing up. He good football player, basketball player. A lot of guys, back then they just played multiple sports. That's just what you did growing up. It wasn't one thing. You went outside, you shot basketball, you played football. I remember countless times out in the backyard with my cousins playing wiffle ball. We did something every day, and I think that's what kids did. And unfortunately, I think a lot of kids get away from that these days.
You just heard from Brandon Garrett, former head coach, I should say, of the Nelson County Governors. He was a pleasure to interview and a pleasure to be friends with nowadays, and hopefully it's a pleasure to listen to the Sports Buffet podcast. I'm Bob Alvis.